Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 28 of the Fourth String Sports Podcast. I am your host, Brady, with my co-hosts, Mitch and Skylar. Gentlemen, how are we doing tonight?
Fly, Eagles, fly.
You don't even know the next words.
Do I need to?
No, I don't think Eagles fans.
No, doing pretty good. This is an interesting team.
Yes, it's going to be an interesting team. It's going to be an interesting episode. We've got an interesting what's list. We're going to give our best player at individual positions. We've got an NBA update from our last episode. We're going to break down the top 25 college football coaches poll that came out. There's some, we'll call them inconsistencies in there. And then we've got our what a putts. We've got our hero of the episode. And then our main course of the night is going to be the Philadelphia Eagles, the reigning NFC East champions. And we're going to break down kind of what we think and how we think they're going to do next year. They've had, obviously, the massive loss of Brandon Brooks. They replaced him by bringing Jason the Bodyguard Peters back in. And so we'll see kind of how we feel about this team now with some additions. They did sign Marquise Goodwin, who we talked about, decided to opt out. So that hurts, but we're going to break down their draft. We're going to break down everything with the Eagles. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. We also have a listener email that we're going to just touch on very lightly here. We appreciate everybody for listening in, for emailing us, for subscribing. Follow us on everything: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Reddit, the whole 9 yards there, SoundCloud, all of it, whatever, at Fourth String Sports, and email us, fourthstringsp@gmail.com. If it's an interesting topic, we'll talk about it, and we'll break it down a little bit. So let's give a quick update to the NBA. Now, on our last episode here, we talked about the bubble coming back. We talked about a couple of games, but there's been quite a few more interesting games just since Tuesday. Today, the Bucks locked up the East with a win over the Heat. They were down by 23 points and came back. They were down 60-40 at one point and outscored the Heat. I think it was like 90-53 or something after that.
Yeah.
It absolutely demolished them there. And they did it primarily with, Giannis played 5 fouls almost the entire fourth quarter.
He had three going into halftime.
3 going into half. He picked up his fourth in the third. He picked up his fifth very early into the fourth, I think. So that was interesting. They came back really in the third quarter based off of their bench, and they had some help with some of those youngsters that we talked about from the Heat did not perform. They started really hot, and then they just kind of fizzled out. And it was admirable to watch, frankly.
And the Heat also didn't have Dragic or Butler playing.
Yeah, Butler or Dragic weren't playing as well. So it's interesting, and that shakes up the race because the Heat were only one game ahead of the Pacers heading into that, and they lost. Now, the Pacers lost to the Suns as well, so they keep that one-game lead there. But that just makes that race there for 4 or 5 very tight. We're also going to talk about, as I said, the top 25 coaches poll and some other stuff. So let's hop right into the NBA here. So we talked about it very briefly. Bucks lock up the 1 seed. Lakers locked up the 1 seed in the West. But the Thunder, with co-coach of the year Billy Donovan, demolished the Lakers. It wasn't even close. There's been very few times, especially recently, that I've seen Chris Paul take over a game, and he absolutely took over that game. Chris Paul in that game, 21 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists. He was 8 of 12 from the field. But the astonishing thing, the Lakers shoot an abysmal 5 of 37 from the three-point line. 2 makes from Kyle Kuzma, 2 from Danny Green, 1 from Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. LeBron goes 0 of 5 from the three-point line, 7 of 19 for the game. Anthony Davis goes 0 of 3 from the three-point line, 3 of 11 the entire game. Unfortunately, our boy Alex Caruso, 0 of 3 from the three-point line. Deion Waiters, 0 of 4 from the three-point line. It was ugly to watch, but man, that goes right back to the Thunder. And here's what's astonishing, right? So Lakers go 5 of 37 from the three-point line. Thunder go 5 of 24, and yet the Thunder win by 19 points. It just shows you how strong that team actually is, because the Lakers shot 35.2%. The Thunder had 9 fewer shots than the Lakers, but only 3 more makes. Yeah. And the percentages goes 43 for the Thunder, 35.2 for the Lakers. So is this more – are we seeing how good the Thunder are, or is this more of a red flag to the Lakers?
I think it might be kind of both. I definitely think the Thunder definitely showed what they're capable of. They're definitely a danger in the West, to me at least. I actually ran a poll on our Twitter accounts, and the poll said that 71% agree that the Thunder are a threat in the West. So I'm glad that I'm not alone. But I don't know. I just with that Lakers team, like you said, Brady, when we first talked about the NBA being back, LeBron does not look like himself. He looks his age. And I think, this game was kind of karma for him coming out and saying, like, oh, yeah, all this success is because of me, and I've been doing it all by myself and that kind of shit, even though he's riding on Anthony Davis's coattails. So I think this is kind of karma, and I was laughing my ass off when I saw this. But, yeah, I think it's a little bit of the Lakers showing where their weaknesses are and where we kind of thought they were all season, and the Thunder showing, like, hey, we're a forgotten contender in the West, and we're going to prove that you should not forget about us. Otherwise, you're going to get your ass kicked.
Yeah, right now, 3 of the best teams in the West aren't even in the top 4 of the league. I mean, we're talking about Thunder, Portland, and the Suns won again today. That's 4. How they beat the
4-0?
Pacers. 4-0. I'm loving watching the Suns do really good. But like we said in the last episode, the Suns do this. They play really well, and then they don't live up to expectations. But I mean, the marquee teams that we're expecting to ball out all have either losing or tying records right now in the bubble. I mean, the Lakers have won 1 game. The Bucks have won 1. The Lakers have won 2.
Yeah, remember
they beat the Clippers.
And they
Yeah.
beat the Jazz.
Yeah, so the Lakers have won 2, but they've lost 2.
Yeah,
Bucks
Lakers
have
are 2-2. Bucks are 2-2.
2-2. Clippers, I think, are 1-3. Or they're playing. They just won, so they're 2-2 again. So it's like these teams. Celtics are 2-2. The only real contender that's been doing really well is the Raptors. Honestly, that was a contender before they got in, and has continued to show that they have the potential to be a contender in the bubble.
So that'll bring up a good point here that I kind of want to debate. Which team is more dangerous in their conference, the Raptors or the Thunders? Now, this doesn't necessarily mean winning their conference, because a dangerous team could be like, we'll say, the Clippers last year, who took the Warriors to 7 in the first round or 6 in the first round, and you could argue really knocked the Warriors back in terms of that contention for the title race. So who's more dangerous in their respective division, the Raptors or the Thunder?
I think the Thunder are, just because of, like, people I think are going to sleep on them even regardless of this game. I mean, I feel like the Raptors are kind of a certified contender, since what they did last year, and they're just kind of repeating it right now. So I think, they're kind of like the Clippers of the East right now, but with the Thunder, they're kind of showing like we can be dangerous, but I don't know if people are going to like see them as like, oh, they're as dangerous as the Lakers and the Clippers and the Nuggets and, that kind of stuff. So I think with that kind of like edge that they have, they could be a lot more dangerous than, say, like a known contender like the Raptors.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree. I think the Raptors, I mean, they've just been playing really well in the bubble. If the Bucks hadn't found a groove in that third quarter, we could be talking about the Raptors catching up to the Bucks. Like, we honestly could be, because it was like if Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero hadn't cooled down, we would be talking about – people would be talking about whether or not the Bucks can win a game to clinch that first seed, or how close is it going to be? When are they going to clinch that first seed? So, like, I agree. The Raptors are too much of a contender. So I have to agree. The Thunder, because I think right now they could get the 4 seed because Utah's playing like shit. And I don't know if they can if they can overtake Denver and hit the 3rd. They probably could. But I don't know at this point. So I think I have to give it to the Thunder, because if they're the 4 seed and they're playing against, what would that be, the 5th? Whoever the 5th seed is.
Yeah, they'd be playing if they and Utah flip. But then if they win that round, then they'd have to play winner of, at this point, Lakers, Grizzlies.
Exactly. So they could really honestly hurt the Lakers unless they get to the 3rd spot. And if they get to the 3rd spot, they could hurt the Clippers. In that Western Conference semifinals. Whereas, like, I think in the East, the team that's the most dangerous right now, the team that's going to be the toughest out, is the Heat, because they are contending with the best teams in the East without their star players. So, I mean, that has something to say about how the Heat are playing. But
yeah, I mean, keeping in mind that if the Raptors hold on to the 2 seed, which they will. They're 5 games behind the Bucks at this point. They can't catch up to the Bucks now that the Bucks have won, but they're 4.5 games ahead of the Celtics, and they do have a head-to-head matchup. So that's that's going to be make or break there.
So I have a
But
question
if-
for you guys.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we've seen obviously that's I think it was Skylar or you, Brady, pointed out that the top contenders aren't really doing that well in the bubble, and like some of the lower teams are. Do you think that's just because that the contenders like really don't have much to play for? Like the Lakers and the Bucks really have nothing to play for right now, whereas a team like Thunder and the Heat are kind of have to play, and the Suns have to play to like get better positioning and that kind of stuff, and that's why they're succeeding.
I think a portion of it is the fact that nobody's going to get actual home games, So it doesn't matter. Really, it doesn't matter whether the Grizzlies or the Thunder get the 4 seed because no team is going to have an inherent advantage,
Yeah.
And I think that teams like Milwaukee and both Los Angeles teams, and even Denver's similar, are resting their guys a lot because they already know, like they're already in the playoffs. They've clinched. So at this point, you're hoping to get a matchup that's preferential, but it's not like you're going to have to worry about having to go anywhere. Like there's one of 3 courts you play on. They're all in Orlando. The only difference is who has virtual fans there, and there's only 300 virtual fans as is. So it's not massive. I think that teams are more those contending teams are more worried about making sure their guys are healthy, are in shape, have game reps so that they're not winded when games actually happen, then I think they give a crap about seeding. Now, for anybody lower than, really in the East, anybody lower than the 2 seed, and in the West, really anybody lower than even Denver at the 3 seed, it doesn't really matter, because none of these teams, like if you're sitting there, if you're, we'll say the Clippers, who are only technically 3 games ahead of Utah, if by chance they fall to the 4 seed, well then yeah, they would probably have to play the Lakers in that semifinal. But I don't think they're worried about that. The whole point of all these teams is that you're built to try to beat every other team in your conference because you never know who you're playing. So I think a large portion of it is just the location and the fact that we're playing in a bubble.
Yeah, I think it's something that has to do with injuries too. With the Celtics, in the game against the Nets, they didn't play Kemba because they were doing
the same with the Bucks. The Bucks sat everybody on. Everybody was done halfway through the second quarter.
I think the Lakers are doing something similar because they were playing until they clinched the West, and that's what they needed. And then now they can just relax until they get to the end of it. Because for the Celtics, the last tough game they have is the Raptors. That's the last tough game they have in the bubble. And if they win that game, they could easily take the 2. They could take the 2 seed if they're able to. If the Raptors stumble a little bit. But again, it's like the top, like Brady said, the top 3 teams in the East and the top 2 teams in the West those are almost guaranteed. So those 5 teams don't really need, there's not as much incentive for them to play that hard. They can get their bench players some minutes. I know with the Celtics, that's something that really needs to happen because our bench hasn't played really well in the season so far, and we're going to need them for playoff time. So getting Robert Williams and some of those other players, just like for Celtics for mine, but I'm also thinking for like Portland getting Nurkic, some more minutes. Who's a great big man. Getting some of those guys that have been injured, haven't been able to play in a long time, getting those guys minutes. And also to your point, if it was they needed seeding, then New Orleans would be playing better. They're not. They lost to Sacramento today. So it's then that they should be playing better if they had more at stake, but they've kind of resigned. It's almost like they've admitted defeat at this point.
Yeah, I also want to give a big shout out there to the Washington Wizards, who are actually currently a half game behind the Charlotte Hornets, who aren't even in the bubble. That's how bad the Wizards have been playing.
Yeah.
And if you look at the Wizards' last 4 games here, Pelicans, which who knows who's going to win that one, but then Thunder, Bucks, Wizards, they could feasibly lose all 4. And if they lose all 4, that means that they would have not only been passed by the Hornets, but also been passed by the Bulls, the Knicks, the Pistons, the Hawks, and the Cavaliers. So they could go to the bubble, and if they lose all 4 of the next games, would finish with the worst record in the East when the bottom 6 teams didn't even play in the bubble.
Honestly, inviting the Wizards was just kind of wasted. I'm sorry.
It really was. It really
Because
was. Now,
because they
obviously, originally when they invited him, they thought Bradley Beal would be there, and we could argue that if he was there, this
It wouldn't
team
make a
would be.
difference.
I think. I mean, I would say that they probably would have won maybe
2 games.
One
They
game.
would have. I mean, if you look at their losses, they lost by 8 to the Nets. They lost by 11 to the to the Pacers. They lost by 9 to the Sixers, and they lost by 13 to the Suns. If you know that he's going to put up more points than that difference, and maybe they don't win all 4 of them. Maybe they don't even win more than one, but I think they win at least one game. But there's a chance they're going to go 0-8 here in the bubble, which would not be surprising in the least. So yeah, let's. The other point I did want to go back to the LeBron point that Mitch said, because he definitely has not been playing anywhere near strong. I mean, his highest points per game in the bubble here were 22 against the Grizzlies in a game that they won. But 22 points against the Grizzlies. He had 16 against the Clippers. He had 20 against the Raptors, and he had 19 against the Thunder. He's posted 3 double doubles with 11 rebounds, 10 rebounds, and 11 rebounds. But he's been playing absolutely abysmally, and he's going to be sitting out this next game against the Rockets due to a groin injury, so he's going to be out for that game. But man, he's looked really bad.
I will say, in his
so far
defense,
this season.
in October, he has said that the Lakers team rides or dies with Anthony Davis. It goes through Anthony
That's
Davis.
not what he said.
That's what he said at the beginning of the year. At the beginning of
Well, he changed his mind like a couple days ago.
what did he say?
He said, like, everybody's been doubting me. I've been the reason we've been winning and that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, and to his point, the only reason the Lakers did as well as they did last year was because he was on that team. Like they were doing.
This is a new team. They have Anthony Davis, who's been leading the charge.
Yeah.
Well, exactly.
He's riding his coattails, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, at his point, but again, I do think that people don't like. The scariest thing to have in the Western Conference is a LeBron that feels like he's underestimated, because that would be bad, in my opinion.
I don't know if it would be, because we're a few years removed and a few finals appearances from being swept from the whole 3-1 comeback. So let's not pretend like he's gotten any younger. His stats.
And plus, do you think Kawhi's really scared of LeBron?
No.
No.
I mean, not in the slightest. LeBron.
No, I don't know.
Yeah.
LeBron saved his one good
think about him.
defensive. LeBron saved his one good defensive play against Kawhi for the last play of the game, and hey, that's great. His team kept him in it, and if that's how the Lakers are going to win, that's how the Lakers are going to win. But LeBron has not been playing fantastic. I hope to see him improve, because I genuinely love watching the artisan of basketball that is LeBron James. But I don't know if we're actually going to see that, because LeBron has never had – the whole thing with LeBron is that, like, everybody said, well, he's never had the help except for when he was in Miami. And now he's getting fucking as good help as he's ever had here with Anthony Davis, who's putting up great numbers. The only game he struggled against was the game against the Thunder. And LeBron really is just riding his coattails. And so who knows? If LeBron gets it going, man, they're the most dangerous team in basketball. But that's a really big if. So let's move on to our other topic that we want to talk about here, which is that the coaches poll, the top 25 coaches poll, came out for college football. Now we're going to go down 25 to 1, and then we're going to get everybody's reactions on it. So number 25, we have Iowa State. Then we have Virginia Tech at 24, Iowa at 23, Cincy at 22, UCF at 21, Utah at 20, North Carolina at 19, Minnesota at 18, USC at 17, OK State at 16, Michigan cracks the top 15, Texas at 14, Texas A&M at 13, Wisconsin at 12, Auburn at 11, Notre Dame at 10, Oregon at 9, Florida at 8, Penn State at 7, Oklahoma at 6, LSU goes just outside of the top 4, comes in at 5, Georgia at 4, Bama at 3, Ohio State at 2, and Clemson at 1. Ironically enough, LSU received 6 ballots for to be number 1. They got the 5th overall place. Alabama received 4 ballots to be number 1 overall. They get the 3rd place. What do you guys make of that list? But before we do that, other teams receiving votes here of note. We got Tennessee, Boise State, Arizona, Kentucky, Memphis, Baylor, Washington, Louisville, Miami of Florida, App State, Navy, Virginia, Air Force, Mississippi State, TCU, Washington State, Tulane, California, Louisiana Lafayette, SMU, Nebraska, Stanford, Pitt, K-State, Indiana, and Duke. So what do you guys make of that list?
Well, I really don't have a problem with the top 5. I like these teams. They're, most likely the top 5. Maybe the order could be a little different. But otherwise, I like that. I think the two biggest or a couple of outliers for me, which don't make sense to me, is like 13 is Texas A&M. Why are they that high or even on the list? It just baffles me. OK State, I think they're only on the list because of Chuba Hubbard.
Yep.
But we'll see what happens. USC, I guess they're really on the Slavis train, so that's why they're there. And then Notre Dame and Penn State being in the top 10, I have an issue with.
So I agree with you on all of your teams that you said besides the top 10. Because I agree that Texas A&M shouldn't be in the top 20. Maybe a fringe top 25 team, but not in the top 20.
Yeah, not 13.
Texas, I honestly think could be ranked higher, in my opinion. Like they could go up to 13, honestly. Michigan should not be in the top 15. OK State should not be in the top 20. UNC, Utah should be higher, in my opinion, but that's their defense bias for me. And I think Iowa State honestly should be ranked higher, just a little bit, because I think that they're better than some of the teams in front of them. But I think Penn State's a top 10 team. I think that, we talked about it a little bit before the recording. Losing Micah Parsons is a big deal. It is a big deal. He's a top 15 pick, the best linebacker in the country, the best defender in the country according to draft boards. Insane talent. He will be missed. And that makes Penn State a fringe top 10 team. But I still think that they're good enough to be top 15. Notre Dame, correct me if I'm wrong, but Ian Book's back.
Yep.
They're returning a lot of starters on the offense, I believe, on that offensive line.
On that offensive line, but the pass catchers are decimated, the pass rush is decimated,
Yeah.
The secondary is decimated. Like, they lost a lot of talent.
So it's an Ian Book effect, honestly. Which I think
It's a quarterback effect for
99.9%. Yeah,
that great though.
He's a lot better than a lot of quarterbacks in college football.
Well, yeah, no doubt. I'm not saying he's bad, but I don't think he's like getting your team into the top 10, top 5 kind of worthy.
But I also know that Notre Dame recruits relatively well. They stole one of the best wide receivers in the country. That was Nebraska, out from Nebraska's nose. And they took him. And so he's a young talent that a lot of teams were excited for. Honestly, Wisconsin at 12, it makes sense. They're a top 15 team. But just like losing Jonathan Taylor, losing some of those offensive linemen, losing Zach Bond, losing some of those defenders. How many returners do you guys have coming back this year that were starters?
We have a good amount, I think, for defense.
Defense, we lost a couple guys to injury who didn't play at all last season, so we got.
And then offense, we only lost three or four people. So,
but there was
a ton.
But that was James Taylor,
our center, our running back, and then 2 of our wide receivers.
Yeah, but our tight end is back. We've got 3 preseason All-Americans on the offensive line.
Okay, well then,
I agree. I think 12 is fitting for Wisconsin to be at. I would not have them crack the top 10.
Going lower.
I honestly think
going lower.
I honestly think that top would be 11, like ceiling for this team before any games are played is 11, and then floor could be 20
maybe,
because
it's gonna depend on quarterback play. That's what it's all gonna be dependent
and
on.
running back.
No, I'm gonna say running back play is more important at Wisconsin.
No, because Nikhil Watson barely played, and he's already on not only Heisman watch list but Doak Walker watch list. I'm confident in the tandem of 3.
I don't know. I don't know how I feel about those lists though.
I never believe those
Jack
lists.
Jack Cohen's on the quarterback list, and you really think he deserves to be
our
on the
tight ends on
our
tight ends on that list. But I don't think Iowa should be a top 25 team because they lost Nate Stanley. They lost some good players. Iowa State's a better team than them, in my opinion. So I feel like they should be higher. I like
And they're going through a
Cincinnati.
scandal.
Yeah, I like that Cincinnati and UCF are on this list. I don't know why UNC is 19.
Because UNC
Their
is a
quarterback,
good team.
Sam Howell.
Sam Howell is a stud.
Sam Howell is a stud, but
They have a good team.
They're
Don't
returning a
underestimate
lot
them.
of talent also.
Okay.
With Mac Brown. Mac
Yeah.
Brown, I mean, Mac Brown in year one was they were had they not gone for 2 and just kicked the field goal and taken Clemson into overtime,
Well, I remember
they
that
probably would have beat Clemson in that game.
game. Okay.
They
Then
played great.
I
And this is
just-
coming from Brady, who hates Mac Brown.
I hate Mac Brown, but I love my Tar Heels. I have an issue with Oregon being as low as 9. I
Yeah,
get
they
it.
should be a
That's
better
low?
team. They should be a better
Oh
team
yeah,
than that.
I get it. They lost a
Wow.
lot of talent, like lost Herbert, but
I mean, you could honestly switch Penn State and Oregon around, and that'd be okay.
I think what I would do is I would put Oregon at 8. I would put Penn State at 9, and I'd move Florida up to 7 because Florida is returning a ton of talent, and I love what they're doing down there in Gainesville. No way in hell Michigan should be ranked higher than Minnesota.
Oh God, no.
And I hate both teams, but no
No.
way in hell Michigan should be ranked.
Minnesota's a
higher than
better
Minnesota.
team. Even after
even losing Bateman, Minnesota's a better team than Michigan is any day of the week.
Fair enough.
Okay, can I say though that in my personal belief, LSU is a better team than Bama. I'm like I was saying the top 5 are top 5 teams. But in my personal opinion, can you see like LSU being 4, Bama being 5, Georgia being
I think
5?
Mac Jones is better than what Miles Brennan can bring to the table. In
I
my
kind
opinion.
of agree. And they're also returning Najee Harris, who's a great halfback.
And
No,
Dylan
agree, no.
Moses.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
And they still have that Savajian Smith kid or whatever.
LSU
Yeah.
lost a lot of offense. Defensively,
did.
they're returning a lot of people, but they
Yeah.
lost a lot of
They have
offensive talent.
they have the best defensive backs in the SEC, if not the country.
Well, yeah, no doubt they're DBU, but still, that offense is not what it's going to be.
I agree.
It's going to be it's Jamar Chase and nobody else.
I think they lost.
Let's be honest.
I think they lost 4 of their 5 starting offensive linemen. Also,
Yeah.
Yeah,
That sounds
their
about
tight
right.
ends, their wide
Yeah.
receivers, their
It's,
quarterback, their running back.
the way that this list for me should go is Wisconsin 12, Texas at 13, Minnesota at probably 14, and then after that it's a jumble up between Michigan, A&M. I don't think A&M should be in the top 25, frankly. OK State, but Minnesota at 18 makes no sense to me. The bottom half of this list,
Yeah.
I almost completely agree with. North Carolina, I love where they're at. Utah, they lost a lot of talent. They lost their quarterback. They lost their halfback. They lost a lot of defenders who we've touched on. UCF and Cincinnati, if UCF gets Mackenzie Milton back, this is a dangerous team. Cincinnati, Luke Fickell is doing a great job out there in Cincinnati. And, yeah, they got crushed by Ohio State, no doubt about
But
that.
so did everyone else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But watch their games against Memphis, man.
Oh, yeah.
The back-to-back weeks they had to play them, that was great. Their bowl game was great.
Yeah.
Iowa, I understand Iowa being in the top 25. I do.
It's more pedigree than what
You're
they actually have.
you're absolutely right. And you could argue that with a lot of these teams. Why is Notre
the
Dame
same
at
reason
10?
why
It's
Nebraska-
pedigree. Why
It's
is
the same
Penn
reason
State-
Nebraska got 3 votes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A lot of it is pedigree. Virginia Tech, I actually love that they're on the list. Virginia Tech's returning a lot of talent. The defensively,
Virginia Tech.
they're
Virginia Tech deserves to be on
solid,
this list.
even though they lost the corner. And Iowa State at 25, I understand. Like, I like Iowa State. I have issues. My issue is I haven't seen him do it consistently. I like Brock Purdy, but he hasn't done it consistently. And if you want an example, just go watch the bowl game against Notre Dame. He played like the whole team played like absolute dog shit against a not great Notre Dame team.
I think
Does anybody else think that Tennessee should not be the second, like, just missed this list?
Yeah, I don't get where the 111 votes are. I think the top team that should be getting the most votes to get into the top 25 should be Arizona State.
I think Arizona State, Boise State, Memphis, Cal should all be higher on that other votes received list. Cal lost a lot of production on that defense. I will give you that, but that head coach is doing an amazing job on that team.
I think Arizona State has more case than the other teams.
Oh, no,
yeah,
Arizona
absolutely.
State definitely
Arizona
does.
And I have to eat my own words
That-
because when we talked about the Herm Edwards
Yeah, you said it was
pickup,
like dog
I said
shit.
it was- I
and
said
he's
it was
doing
dog
great.
shit. I thought he was never going to be able to produce
No,
anything.
he's doing amazing.
And he's doing
Jaden
great.
Daniels
So,
is
I
a
gotta eat my
stud.
I got to eat my own words there.
No.
Because Herm Edwards is pulling in 5-star recruits. He's playing.
Who doesn't want to play for Herm Edwards? I'm sorry. I'd want to play for Herm Edwards.
I understand Tennessee being on that list, like they started out last year bad. Like obviously everybody will tell you that.
Who's even their
Um,
quarterback?
I'm trying to get their stats,
Is it still that Guantanamo Bay kid?
something like that. You know, lost to Georgia State, lost to BYU, lost bad to Florida, lost bad to Michigan or to Georgia, lost bad to Alabama. But you know, they were plus in their own conference, 5-3 in conference, beat Mississippi State, beat South Carolina, one at Kentucky, one at Missouri, beat Vanderbilt, but you know, whatever, that's a given, and then beat an Indiana team that was actually pretty solid in the bowl game. They finished strong, you know, and finishing strong is a huge thing, especially when you're in a building program like Tennessee is. Do I think that they're gonna? I mean, Tennessee is 0 of 33 against ranked teams since the college football playoff started. And I think their average margin of defeat has been like 30 plus points. They're not near where they need to be, but this team I could easily see crack the top 25 at some point this season before they have to play Alabama or Georgia or somebody like that. I there's just this list really feels so much more pedigree based than it ever has. I mean, Texas A&M and Texas both being top 15, Michigan being top
USC,
15.
Michigan.
Yeah, and I haven't even touched on USC yet. I mean, USC did not play well. That bowl game against Iowa was a crapshoot for USC. And I get it, man. Like they lost, their quarterbacks were consistently lost between Daniels and Slovis and stuff like that. And so I understand, but this team is not returning a ton of talent. They lost their number one wide receiver. They lost their best offensive lineman again. Defensively, they lost a lot of guys. I don't understand that. When it comes to the top five, I have no qualms on it. Georgia's over LSU slowly because of the Wake Forest kid transfer, and they're returning a bunch of talent. Oklahoma at 6. People have high hopes of Spencer Rattler, so I understand.
Didn't he get injured in training camp?
No, not that I've heard. I haven't heard anything about that.
One of the two people that were fighting for that quarterback battle got injured.
I don't think anybody's going to have any issues with whoever is playing quarterback at Oklahoma.
I have to look at it though, because I can't remember now.
But yeah, I mean, I think that Oregon should probably be at 7 or 8, and I think Penn State, especially after the Micah Parsons loss, should probably be at 9 or 10. Notre Dame shouldn't even be in the top 15 with how many people they lost. But again, it's pedigree based. I mean, you lost Chase Claypool, you lost Okwara, you lost a bunch of guys in the secondary. You lost quite a few offensive linemen. And I get it. Notre Dame can replenish. Like, it's Notre Dame. They're going to recruit well. But all of those guys not only now don't get as long of a training camp, but now they're having to play. They don't get the warm-up games like they did.
No,
now they're having to go. Yeah, now they're having to go ACC. I mean, they play Clemson like week 6 of their schedule, week 4 or week 6 or something like that. And luckily, it's at Notre Dame, but that's not going to be a cakewalk. And that's going to be a tough game for a really young team. So there's issues with it, but again, it's the first list. And
in my opinion, I always like the coaches poll more than I like
the AP one,
the AP media poll, because
media poll is so biased. Media poll is so more
because the coaches poll, like, I can understand why somebody can be making that pick. Like, I can understand why somebody would be like, we're going to put Penn State and Notre Dame in the top 10 because they have good coaches. James Franklin and Brian Kelly are good coaches, and they've been known to replenish talent that's lost. That makes sense. But when you look at and the coaches put Cincinnati and they put UCF and they put Minnesota in the list, whereas you look at Utah, and then you look at the media poll and it's like those 5 teams are nowhere to be seen because they're all obsessed with SEC.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But then I was looking at anticipatory polls and stuff, and it was consistently I saw Wisconsin at anywhere from 9 to 13. So being at 12 makes sense. But then it was usually wherever Wisconsin was, Minnesota was 2 spots behind them. You know, and it Michigan was typically I saw Michigan, unless the poll was from Michigan fans, at 17 or 18, way lower down on the list than where they are now. A&M, and I did not see on a bunch of polls. Texas, I saw on a few. OK State, I wasn't high on.
And the pedigree could honestly just be Jimbo Fisher. Just being Jimbo Fisher's, which I've never which even he's a good coach, but I've never understood all of the hype behind Jimbo Fisher because he had good seasons with Florida State. He's done okay with Texas A&M, but like the hype behind him, I never really understood.
Yeah,
Oh,
A&M
that's-
hasn't produced the way that people initially thought, not the contract that he got. So,
Oh,
all right,
that's
boys,
fun.
let's move on to our main
List.
dish of the game
Yep.
here, the Philadelphia.
We haven't done our what's lists, bud.
Oh my God, that's right, our what's list. I was hoping you guys would forget. All right, I gotta go first.
No, we're not gonna forget about this. I'm
Yeah,
excited.
you go. Yeah, you go first.
I go
Brady
first.
goes
All right,
first.
So, Skylar,
Yeah.
what's our what's list? You
Our
came up
what's
with the topic.
lists are the basically the 7 positions of football because football is becoming more and more positionless. You have your quarterback, you have your running back, you have your pass catcher, your offensive line, D-line, linebacker, defensive back. I asked these 2 gentlemen to give me their best players at each position, and it depended on the scheme, what they're listed on the roster is what you could put them in those different positions. But yes, Brady, because I asked the question, you go first.
All right, you guys are gonna hate me on this list. Quarterback, I go Pat Mahomes. It's really not that big of an issue with me. Lamar Jackson is great, but unlike Pat Mahomes, he hasn't proven in the playoffs, and that's big. Running back, I went Ezekiel Elliott. I think he's a great all-down back. I think that he's good in the pass-catching game. Yeah, you could argue he runs behind a really good offensive line, but even when there was injuries, his stats are just consistent. Pass catcher was one of, if not the most difficult topic for me. And I went with my gut. I went with, if I was building one team, who would I want as my number 1 wide receiver? And I picked Julio Jones. I just feel like he's consistent. Atlanta has obviously always had some pretty solid number 2 options around him, but Julio is Julio, and he puts up his stats no matter what. Offensive linemen in general, I went with the guard from Indianapolis, Mr. Quentin Nelson. 2 years in the league, All-Pro both years, top 10 player voted both years. He's solid in the pass game. He's solid in the run game. D-line, Aaron Donald. It's really not even close. If this list was 3 or 4 years ago, J.J. Watt, but it's Aaron Donald. I went linebacker, and then I also went pass rusher, so I added an extra one for pass rusher. I went Khalil Mack, and obviously we're going to argue about it. I just feel like Khalil Mack is a stronger, more dominant guy. I feel like he can offer you a lot more consistently. Yeah, his stats took a downturn, but if I'm building a pass rusher, man, I'm building it around Khalil Mack. Linebacker, I went with a shocker pick. I went with Fred Warner from the 49ers. With Luke Kuechly now being out of the league, I went back and I watched a lot of 49ers film, and Fred Warner just consistently popped out to me. Robert Saleh had great things to say about him. He was a real core. Even watching the games against Green Bay, he was instrumental in shutting down guys like Aaron Jones and stopping a lot of those inside crossing routes. Watch his games against Seattle. He plays absolutely lights out. And then for secondary, I went Stephon Gilmore. I don't really think that it's that big of a debate. Stephon Gilmore is by far, is one of, if not the best corner in the league. Defensive player of the year. He's shut down. So, yeah, that's my list.
I only have a problem with your edge rusher pick, but everything else I can totally agree with.
Yeah, and Mitch goes with, whatever.
No, I agreed. Half of our lists are the same, but I mean, on the parts that we didn't agree, I can see why you made those picks, because those, like, the ones that we didn't agree were like the hardest ones to come up with a person for, honestly. But no, and I totally agree with pass rusher Khalil Mack because he's the best pass rusher in the NFL.
I don't know. I see, and that's where it's like, I don't know if he's the best pass rusher in the NFL. I just know that if I were building a team, like if I went onto the Madden fantasy draft and I got to pick a pass rusher, I want to pick Khalil Mack, because when he's not getting sacks, he's getting forced fumbles, he's getting tackles for losses, he's getting blown up plays.
Pretty good guarding the edge when in the run game.
Yeah, he can guard halfbacks coming out, that kind of stuff. And now, especially that he's going to have help with the signing of Robert Quinn and getting Akeem Hicks back, he should be back to his normal self. With Quentin, with all these picks, it was literally just, if I could pick one guy to build a team around, then man, this is it. Ezekiel Elliott was, with the exception of the Julio Jones pick, Ezekiel Elliott was the toughest one, because it was such a toss-up for me. It was Ezekiel Elliott, or did I want Christian McCaffrey, or guys like that, And when it came down to it, I kind of went back to the Green Bay-Carolina game, where if I needed to pick up 1 yard, Christian McCaffrey couldn't do it, but I'm fairly confident Ezekiel Elliott could have,
Makes sense.
So that's my list. That's how I came down with it.
All right,
All right,
Mitch.
fair enough. I guess I'm up. At quarterback, I had Patrick Mahomes. Shocker. Right now, he's the best, quarterback in the league. What he can do throwing the ball and when he's got to scramble and stuff, I think he's the closest player to Brett Favre, in my opinion, right now. At running back, I have to go with Christian McCaffrey. The dude's just really versatile. His rushing and receiving stats are amazing. He catches 80% of his passes. I just like the versatility that I can use him in any down in any situation, so that's why he gets my nod.
Fair.
I'm really glad that you picked the same pass catcher as me, Julio Jones, a guy I think gets really slept on and should be considered the number one receiver in the league. The dude's consistent. He basically just puts his head down, goes to work, and makes you look silly. And if you want to see like his dominance, just go back and watch his 2015 tape. He was a monster that year. Let's see. For O-line, I went David Bakhtiari. Maybe that's a little bit of a homer pick, but I think he's been consistent. Everyone says he's the best, left tackle in the league. I just like what he does. Defensive line, Aaron Donald. The guy is a one-man wrecking crew. It seems like no matter how many guys you put on him, he'll still get through and sack your quarterback. He's probably the most dominant defensive player in the league right now. Linebacker, I had to go with Chandler Jones. The dude's been consistent his whole career. He's only missed 3 games. He's had double-digit sacks all but 2 seasons. You got to love that. He's got 421 tackles throughout his career, 23 pass deflections, 27 forced fumbles, 96 sacks. He just kind of does it all, and that's why I had to go with him. With the secondary pick, I think this is where I'm going to get the most flack from you guys. I had to go with the Honey Badger, and here's why. The way that Skylar phrased this position is secondary. So I had to look at a guy who could play corner and could play safety, and I think Tyrann Mathieu can do that and exceed well at it. And, there was some down years, of course, because of injury, but when he's healthy, he's, one of the better secondary players. And I think just the versatility that he brings to you in your secondary is why I had to go with him over a guy like, Stephon Gilmore or Jalen Ramsey or Jamal Adams or someone like that.
I can understand all your picks. Tyrann Mathieu isn't even he's not even my top safety. I'd take Jamal Adams over Tyrann Mathieu. Most days. I don't know if current Malcolm Jenkins.
Not most days, but some days.
I agree with you on most of it. When Tyrann Mathieu is a great player. I probably would have taken Jamal Adams. Now, granted, I went with corner. I went with Stephon Gilmore. But if I had to throw a toss-up between Tyrann Mathieu or Jamal Adams, I'd probably take Jamal Adams purely for the sake. We talked about it, 6.5 sacks last year. Excuse me. He only had 2 interceptions, but he's only been in the league 2 years. I think his production is as good as Tyrann Mathieu's while being a younger guy, not having maybe the outside problems that Tyrann Mathieu had. But, I respect it. I can understand it. I probably would have gone with Jamal Adams.
Yeah, it's the same. I can respect it. Because, Honey Badger was one of the most, versatile players in the country coming out of college. And, in the NFL, he still is. He's a big reason why Kansas City's defense improved was him. But I have to agree with Brady. I don't think he's my top safety. He's definitely, but he's versatile, so I can understand it why you picked him. Given the wording, again, I as the linebacker Chandler. I love Chandler Jones. I love him at New England. I wish he was still with New England. But I would take a Khalil Mack or my pick over him just in building a team around and trying to win as many games as I possibly could. Again, I understand that he's a dominant player on that Arizona defense. Besides Patrick Peterson, he's really the only person on that defense. So I understand it, but it's just not where I would have gone.
So fuck you, Mitch. All right, Skyler.
For quarterback, I agree with both of you guys. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. If I'm building a team and I want to win now, Patrick Mahomes is under center for me because he's just the most dangerous person one of the most dangerous players in the NFL, and he plays at the most important position in the NFL. For running back, I agree with Mitch. I think that Christian McCaffrey is. I get in a 1,000-yard receiver and a 1,000-yard running back. I do understand the problems with like having him at the 1-yard line. Need to punch it in for the win. I get that. Where Ezekiel Elliott might shine more, but just in how he affects the game and the damage he does, I had to go with Christian McCaffrey. For pass catcher, this is one of the few where I disagree with both of you. I went George Kittle. Like I just liked him. I liked him as a tight end. He is a 1,000-yard receiver as a tight end. He's relatively fast. He really doesn't think anybody can tackle him. Just watching him play against the Saints, that one catch at the very end of the game was an amazing catch to see. He's been in the league for only a few years. He's the best of the Iowa tight ends. And I mean, if I like him for just his versatility because he's not a bad blocker on the outside either. And I feel like you can do a lot of damage with him. I like the versatility of the player. I think that he's a real leader on that team. And he's a Halo fan. So you know what? That's just a plus. For offensive line, I agree with Brady. Quentin Nelson is the best offensive lineman in the league. Only been in the league 2 years, all pro both years. Like one of the first all pros as a rookie on the offensive line in a long time. He's only going up. He's a young player. He's just going to do amazing things. D-line, Aaron Donald, interior lineman that is dominant and can pass rush. Do I need to say anymore? Linebacker, actually, I went Levante David. This is a very homer pick, but I have reasons to back it up. Besides Ray Lewis, he is the only linebacker to have 1,000 tackles, 100 tackles for a loss, 20 sacks, and where's the last stat? And more than 10 interceptions. I mean, that's dominant as a player. In his first 8 years in the league, he's done all of that. Okay, he can rush the passer if you need to. He's had a 7-sack season. He can play in coverage. He is one of the best linebackers in coverage in the NFL. He is the most underrated player in the NFL, in my opinion. And again, that is such Husker biasness. I will give it to both of you. It's Husker biasness. But if I'm building a player he's versatile, he can do what I ask him. He gets the job done. I'm putting Levante David in there. Khalil Davis is also a great pick. Chandler Jones is also an amazing pick. Levante David would be an all-pro if he was on any other team besides the Bucs. And then defensive back, Gilly Lock, Stephon Gilmore, one of the last lockdown corners in the NFL. He scored more touchdowns than he gave up last year. Rightfully the defensive player of the year. Has strengthened the defensive backfield for New England. And we got him from the Bills, and that just makes it sweeter. So, yeah, I'm done. Let the hate begin.
I mean, like the George Kittle pick, I can understand. If I'm going pass catcher, I don't even know if George Kittle's in my top 10. I think he can be dominant. I think that he can be a great player. He is a great player. He, again, he's good off of a lot of positions. I don't believe that he can take over a game the way that Julio or that, Hopkins can, or the way that Devontae Adams can, or the way that a lot of other guys can. I don't see him as being that, because I think that when I look at it as like, when I look at the premier linebackers in the NFL, I think a lot of them can feasibly cover George Kittle. And then when I think of the premier wide receivers in the NFL, I don't think a lot of them can cover Julio Jones or DeAndre Hopkins or like even solidly. Now, like Stephon Gilmore is one of, if not the only exception to that. Like Stephon Gilmore, just look at his game against Houston. DeAndre Hopkins had good stats, but he was against Stephon Gilmore, I believe he only had 2 catches.
The only wide receiver last year to put up 100 yards in Stephon Gilmore was Parker.
Devontae Parker, yeah.
Devontae Parker, which is just sad, but.
And I mean, I'm gonna give you pushback on Levante David. You know that I am. It's a homer pick. At least with Mitch's, I can kind of understand his homer pick with Bakhtiari, because Bakhtiari is consistently graded the best pass blocker in the NFL. With David, I get it. Like the statistics are there in company with Ray Lewis is great company. You know, he can be good covering guys. But when I think about linebackers, I think about guys who, if I need to get a stop, who am I going to put in to get a stop? And Lavonte David isn't on that list of players in my mind. Now, again, for me, had he not retired, Luke Kuechly would have been number one.
Oh, yeah. No, Luke Kuechly,
absolutely, no doubt.
Yeah.
But when I look at dominant linebackers, Lavonte David isn't on my list. So
makes sense. No, it's understandable. Again, I think that being on the Bucks hurts him a little bit because he has to make up for some shitty D-line play.
I do also think he gets overlooked by Devin White because Devin White is a great linebacker there too.
Yeah, he played better than David White last year, and people still didn't talk about it.
The difference is an 8-year vet versus a kid in his second season.
True, but from how people were talking, you would think Devin White was the savior of the Bucks defense.
Yeah, but Devin White rides horses.
I mean, yeah. I can't argue.
So does
that.
Putin.
So does Putin. Yeah.
Well, no.
Mitch, you have any qualms on his list?
Nothing in the vein of this guy should not be on your list. I get the Kittle pick where you're coming from. Lavonte David, I've been high on just because I'm a Tampa Bay Bucks fan, but I don't get why you think he's better than my Chandler Jones pick. So that's where my qualm is. But I respect the pick. And then Gilmore pick, I don't know. I get it, but kind of a homer pick with the Lavonte David one as well.
Yeah. For Lavonte, it was if I'm going to have Aaron Donald. Again, it was getting to the point where I got so down on the list where it's okay, well, if I have all of these players, if I have an Aaron Donald, well, then I can pick up a Lavonte David. I don't need a Chandler Jones or a Khalil Mack to get to the quarterback because I got Aaron Donald. And that was kind of an oversight on my part. But, again, it was fun. I like this list. I got to be a little bit of a homer. I think Stephon Gilmore, though, is not a homer pick. I think he is the best defensive back in the NFL.
Corner.
Still a defensive back, Mitch.
Still a defensive back. Still a secondary player. He could play safety if he wanted to, but he just doesn't.
Doubt it.
Because we have better safeties. It's okay. We don't need.
All right. So then
yeah.
I have the next what's list, and I'm going to break down I want you to give me the top 10 most difficult places in college football to play. You can put them in order if you want. I don't care. You can name me just 10. But I'll allow the guys to put caveats on there. So I'll allow them to say, Ohio State when they're playing Michigan or something like that, or no, not that specific. But we'll say Iowa night game at home. We'll say, Penn State during a whiteout. We'll say that kind of stuff. Give me the top 10 most difficult places to play in college football. So now, after I was so rudely interrupted, let's move on to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, the Eagles went 9-7 last year. They did win the NFC East. They lost in the wild card round to Seattle 20-17 after Carson Wentz went down in the first quarter with a concussion, and Josh McCown with a ripped tendon in his leg almost led the Eagles to victory. Wentz last year, 4,039 yards, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Miles Sanders, 818 rushing yards, 509 receiving yards, 6 total touchdowns. Zach Ertz, 88 receptions, 916 yards, 6 touchdowns. Let's break down some of their free agent losses from last season. Big one, Nelson Baby Hands Aguilar went to the Oakland Raiders. Malcolm Jenkins, their longtime safety, two-time Super Bowl champ, went back to New Orleans. Ronald Darby, their corner, went to Washington. Jordan Howard, the back they traded for from Chicago, went down to Miami. And Halapuli Vaitai, one of their right tackles, went to Detroit. And for free agent pickups, in a trade with Detroit, they picked up Darius Slay. They grabbed corner Nicole Roby-Coleman from the Rams. Javon Hargrave, D-tackle from Pittsburgh. Will Parks, safety from Denver. So how do you guys grade their free agent losses and free agent pickups?
For losses, even though they lost a lot of names, there's only 3 guys to me that I think that are going to affect them this year. Obviously losing Malcolm Jenkins just because of the leader he was and what he was able to do at the safety position. That's going to hurt them. Nigel Bradham, I know, not a guy that gets a lot of attention, but he was very productive and very much a glue guy for them on that defense. And then also Vinny Curry, I think, the forgotten man on that vaunted defensive line and, productive edge rusher. I think those 3 guys will hurt them a lot. But for everyone else they lost, I think, they'll be just fine. And then for pickups, obviously, what they did with the secondary, getting big play Slay, because they desperately needed somebody at the corner. And then Nickel Roby Coleman, I think, is a solid nickel guy. Will Parks could help them with that safety. And then Javon Hargrave, just adds that defensive line. So I think I would give, the gains a B+, and probably the losses B-.
Yeah, overall, I'm just going to give it a B because it kind of canceled itself out, losing those defensive backs and then getting, 3 pretty good defensive backs in return through free agency. And then again, even though we can joke around with Nelson Aguilar being baby hands and dropping so many passes and never living up to the expectations that people thought he was going to have in Philadelphia, he still put up some numbers, and he was at that point at the end of the season their only wide receiver, honestly, that wasn't undrafted. So I feel like he won't be missed entirely because of what they did later in the draft. But still just having that veteran presence sometimes is missed. But again, it's like a B because they got out better on that end, especially on that secondary, than what they lost.
Yeah, I'd probably give it a B-. I wish they would have done more to address the safety position. I like Will Parks. He didn't get a ton of playing time in Denver. We know what kind of defense the D coordinator Schwartz is going to want to run. I don't know how he's going to fit into that. Obvious upgrades at the corner position. As Packer fans, we watched Devontae Adams trash Ronald Darby last year. And if it wasn't for a turf toe injury, Devontae probably would have put up 200 yards in that game easily against the Eagles. Darius Slay, great 13 passes defense last year. He had 21, I think, the year before that. Nickel Roby Coleman had 7 passes defense. He's a really solid nickel guy. And when we talk about their matchups, especially against the Cowboys, where the Cowboys have now 3 dynamic wide receivers to cover, he's going to be big. I like the Javon Hargrave pickup a lot. 60 tackles, 4 sacks at Pittsburgh. He was a really big part of that defensive line that didn't get a lot of credit. My big concern, though, is just that safety position, because your corners are great, but your corners are still going to get beat. And if you're not solid at that safety position behind them, then you can get really, really iffy. So that's why I put a little caveat on it. And then obviously their other big free agent pickup was bringing back Jason Peters on that offensive line. So, all right. So now that we've broken down their free agent losses and pickups, let's move on to their draft. Now, Philadelphia had 10 draft picks. I'm going to go right down the list, and then we're going to talk about who stands out, including their second-round pick. In the first-round pick, number 21 overall, they went Jalen Reagor, wide receiver out of TCU. Second-round pick, number 53, they went Jalen Hurts, quarterback out of OU by Alabama. Third-round, linebacker Davion Taylor from Colorado. Fourth-round, Kevon Wallace, safety from Clemson. Fourth-round, they went Jack Driscoll, offensive lineman from Auburn. Fifth-round, they went John Hightower, wide receiver from Boise State. They had 3 sixth-round picks where they went with Sean Bradley, a linebacker from Temple, Quez Watkins, a wide receiver from Southern Miss, and Prince Tega Wanogho, a lineman from Auburn. And in the 7th round, they drafted Casey Toohill, linebacker from Stanford. So who stands out, and what's your opinion on the Jalen Hurts pick in the second round?
To me, there's only a couple people that stand out. I guess start with the first one, Jalen Reagor. He was a guy that I wanted Green Bay to get. I think he, was amazing at TCU. Obviously, there was some, injury questions and play style. But I think that if he plays to his potential, even though they got a lot of flack for it, he could prove a lot of people wrong. I like the Prince Tega Wanogho pick. I think he's an underrated offensive lineman. And even though Jason Peters did come back, so that kind of solves a little bit of things, I think he's good long-term depth for them. So I applaud them for getting a guy like that. And then Kevon Wallace, I think, just adds more depth to the safety position, which they desperately need. With the Jalen Hurts pick, I said to you, Brady, when it happened that it was really confusing. I think it's more confusing than, Jordan Love getting picked by the Packers. Because, Carson Wentz is still in his prime and stuff, and for them to get a second-round quarterback, and from what we've heard so far, it doesn't sound like, Jalen Hurts has a shot of like starting. So you kind of wonder why they picked him. To me, I think they picked him because they're waiting for Carson Wentz to get that next like major injury that knocks him out of like right before the playoffs or a long extended of time. So they kind of go over to like Jalen Hurts and see what he got and kind of move on from Wentz, in my opinion.
Yeah, see, looking at it, I'm glad that they added some wide receiver depth. Because we saw that towards the end of the season that kind of hurt them. Getting Jalen Reagor, getting John Hightower from Boise State, Quez Watkins, players that they need desperately. Because towards the end of that season, again, we were getting the converted quarterback to a wide receiver from the AAF, starting some games for them, which doesn't help them when you're trying to beat Seattle. Because if they had some wide receivers, who knows? Maybe they would have won that game. I personally like the Jalen Hurts pick. I think that it gives them the ability to have a person that can learn the position, learn the quarterback, still be dynamic, still do the things that he was able to do at Oklahoma in his last season, and gives them a cheap backup for Wentz in case he goes down. Because then if they need a backup that can do some dynamic things and start to fit the quarterback mold that we're starting to see in the NFL with the Deshaun Watsons and Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jacksons, where you need to run and be able to create plays with your legs now in more days. Jalen Hurts is able to do that. I like that they added safety with Kevon Wallace, getting somebody back there to, like Brady was saying, in the offseason, they losing Malcolm Jenkins at that safety position. They could have great corners, but if they get past the corner in the zone, not having somebody. And then they built some depth up on that linebacker position, which, Nate Gary, who's a Nebraska player, is their linebacker, but he's a converted safety. You need some big, stocky linebackers for the NFC East with these running backs that you have running at them. So, I give it a B+ because I think I see it as a pretty good draft. They filled needs, got players where they got filled depth where they desperately needed it, specifically at the wide receiver position, and got a cheap backup that can do well for them in case he is needed to be called upon.
Yeah, I also gave it a B+ grade wise. Me and Mitch even went back and forth with it when they drafted Jalen Reagor because guys like Justin Jefferson and T. Higgins were there and available, and it was confusing because it felt like Philadelphia needed that true number one stocky, tall wide receiver, and Jalen Reagor doesn't fit that mold. But at the same time, I also very much love the offense that Doug Peterson runs. It's very dink and dunk. It's not massive wide receivers. It's almost very New England-esque in that it's a group of no-name wide receivers with maybe one or two guys who are above 6'3", who are out there. And so I understand it. I love that they drafted multiple wide receivers. John Hightower, I really liked out of Boise State. And Quez Watkins, I loved. He was a guy I had on my sleeper list as a late round pick and a very wide receiver heavy year. I think had he maybe come out next year or had he been available the year before, he probably would have been a late 3, early 4th round pick. But because of just how heavy wide receiver it was this year, he ended up falling to 6. Into the 6th round. Linebacker, again, they drafted 3 linebackers. I'm not going to hate them on it. Davion Taylor, I actually really liked out of Colorado. Kevon Wallace, I think it adds depth, but to me, I don't see that safety replacement. Malcolm Jenkins played 100% of defensive snaps last year as safety for Philadelphia. And they're not replacing him with they're almost replacing him with 3 guys. They're going to run safety by committee type thing. And that can work, but I just don't see them having that true safety there. And that's why they were one of the teams that was rumored to be very interested in Jamal Adams. But instead Seattle swooped in. With the Jalen Hurts pick, I love the Jalen Hurts pick. I've always been a massive fan of when teams draft a young quarterback, then either that same draft or the next draft, drafting another young quarterback. And a prime example is actually the Redskins who did it. Remember, they drafted Robert Griffin III in the 1st round and Kirk Cousins in the 4th of that draft. And unfortunately, RG3 wasn't able to pan out, but they got a couple of playoff games out of Kirk Cousins. Now, obviously, he hasn't panned out as well, but it puts your organization in a stable position. Because right now your backups are you're looking at Nate Sudfeld to come in and play quarterback if a guy like Carson Wentz gets hurt again. Will he get hurt again? I mean, yeah, probably. It's the quarterback position. Quarterbacks get hurt more often than people actually realize. But I love the Jalen Hurts pick. I feel like even if he doesn't get a whole lot of starting opportunities, 3 years from now, he's a trade asset, and you can get maybe a 4th-round pick out of him.
New England.
Yeah, if he ends up balling out, maybe you can flip him for a second, or you can flip him for a first to a team that's very quarterback needy. I think Jalen Hurts to me has always had the best head on his shoulders of any player in college football. What he did at Alabama, what he did at Oklahoma, the work he would put in even after blowing out teams was admirable. He's a great human being. He's a great football player. I'm excited to see him play.
He was treated dirty at Alabama.
Yeah, he absolutely was. I like them going multiple offensive line. I give it a B+ because I think that there's a lot of production they could get out of here, especially at the wide receiver level, but I can't go higher because of picks like Jalen Hurts in the 2nd round. I think he probably would have been available with either of their 4th-round picks, especially with how front-loaded the quarterback group this year was. I don't know if he was worth a 2nd round because honestly, once those first teams drafted a quarterback, teams like the Chargers, I mean, even the shocker that the Packers did, teams like the Dolphins, not many teams were backup quarterback needy to the point where Jalen Hurts really fit their mold. I mean, we're talking about New England. Would New England have drafted Jalen Hurts? Probably not.
Maybe Pittsburgh.
Maybe Pittsburgh because they like Josh Dobbs, but they ended up trading Josh Dobbs, and it seems like they're really high on the Mason Rudolph situation.
Really?
Yeah, so I hate Mason Rudolph.
Ugh.
No, Pittsburgh is very high on Mason Rudolph, and I have no
Why?
idea
He was
why.
trash.
He was trash.
I'd rather have Hurts.
No, he was
Hurts is better than Dobbs too. So
he was absolutely trash. But I've been reading Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh's the next episode. I've been reading insider stuff on them, and as an organization, they're very high on Mason Rudolph.
They don't like Duck.
No, they don't like Duck. I think a large part of it is because they have James Washington, and they want to keep that because they both played at Oklahoma State. So,
even though they're both,
I mean, James Washington played better, but
Washington
Rudolph was bad.
Still.
So, but teams, I mean, like Pittsburgh wasn't very needy. There were talks of Detroit, but Detroit wasn't sold on him. There were talks of Chicago, but then Chicago traded for Nick Foles, so they really didn't want to jam that room up even worse. So, I mean, I get it. I understand it. I like the pick, and I think if anybody can utilize him, it's a guy like Doug Peterson, you know?
Yeah. No, I mean, I get it. And he fits the mold of what the NFL is going towards in quarterbacks. So if Carson Wentz doesn't work out and injuries become too much of an issue like an Andrew Luck, you're not surprised like Indianapolis was. So I think it fits because they have him for 4 years. So it works.
Well, here's my question for you guys. How soon do you think Jalen Hurts takes over?
I don't know if he ever takes over.
I don't know. I think at earliest he'll take over maybe 2 seasons from now because I feel like they'll give Carson Wentz 2 more tries. Just because he's a 1st-round pick. And when he does play, he's a good quarterback.
Great quarterback.
He's an MVP level quarterback when he does play. So yeah, it's just we'll see. Honestly, I think Jalen Hurts. I'm with Brady here. I think Jalen Hurts is most used as a trade asset where you get the New Englands and you'll get the other teams down the road where you have older quarterbacks or you have quarterbacks that you don't know what they're doing. Like if Cam Newton doesn't do the best with New England, but the offense still does, but Bill Belichick likes where the offense is going, then you trade for Jalen Hurts. And you got a quarterback that can run the same kind of offense and in the same model, but doesn't have the injury issues.
And it's the same. I mean, you could talk about Tennessee doing a similar thing. You could talk about, I mean, Deshaun Watson.
Raiders, I can see doing it.
The Raiders doing a similar thing. Deshaun Watson has not made impasses with contract talks with the Texans. And if I'm Deshaun Watson, I don't want to stay in Houston.
For sure.
You know, you could talk. There's a lot of teams that would be very quarterback needy there, feasibly within the next couple of seasons. And there's even teams that we haven't even mentioned. I don't know if he ever takes over. I don't think he was ever meant to be the successor. I think he's just meant to be a stable, serviceable backup that can get you snaps. Because
it's a high pick for a backup, though.
Well, you're right, but remember, the year after Green Bay drafted Aaron Rodgers, they spent a 2nd-round pick on the Purdue head coach's brother from Louisville. And
Brom?
Brom, yeah, remember
Brian
they drafted
Brom?
Brian Brom, and he was supposed to be the backup to Brett Favre because that was the first year that McCarthy was there, and McCarthy liked Brom more than he liked Rodgers. So it's not unheard of, it's not unseen of that kind of stuff happening.
I mean,
Well,
Brian
I mean,
Brom's a legend, so you get it.
Well, I
but-
mean, even then, look at the Patriots. How many quarterbacks have they drafted after having Tom Brady in third, fourth? I mean, they
yeah, it's
drafted.
kind of the Ron Wolf method.
It is. But look what they gotten out of it. Because Tom Brady was suspended.
Yeah.
And they needed to play both of their backups. They were able to get things for both Jimmy G and
Jacoby Brissett.
Jacoby Brissett, because they both showed they could win and do good things. So I mean, like, again, it's like if he doesn't play, it's a second round pick.
Yeah.
It's not that much money. And if he does play and does well, you can trade him.
Yeah. And he's the ultimate trade asset because if let's say 2 years from now, a team like Tennessee or God forbid Seattle or some team, Houston or whatever, needs a quarterback, they're not going to – Philadelphia is not going to really save any money. So they can go to him and go to Houston or go to any team and say, okay, you got to give me a first because he's under contract for 2 more years. You get to pay him as a little amount of money. And we've seen it. The most successful time for any team to win a Super Bowl is when their quarterback's on their rookie contract. You keep him on a rookie contract, you give us a first-round pick, it's a win-win for both teams. So I truly think he'll end up being an asset. But I'll also think that there'll be plays that Doug Peterson will get him signed up for or set up for because he's a great athlete. He's a great quarterback.
They use him like a Taysom Hill situation almost for a little bit.
Yeah, and even though he didn't play great against LSU in that semifinal, nobody did. He still had great moments against LSU in that semifinal, and he was the only reason. Yeah, he's the only reason that the game
was even close.
and not even that. He's the only reason the game was an absolute blowout. Had it been really any other quarterback back there, I truly don't know if Oklahoma would have scored any points. So let's move on to our season predictions for the Eagles. Again, we're changing it up a little bit. We're just going to go with what we think their overall record is going to be, looking at their schedule and other information like that. My schedule for Philadelphia changed a lot, and the biggest portion of it was the Brandon Brooks injury. Because at first I had Philadelphia going about 12-4, and then Brooks got hurt, and I had them going about 8-8. And then they brought back Peters and said they're going to move him to guard, so they're still going to keep their tackle that they really like. So all in all, I have the Eagles going 10-6. I feel like this team has done enough defensively to improve. I feel like this team has done enough offensively. If we get another, 1,300-yard, 6-touchdown season out of Miles Sanders, even if he doesn't improve, that's still solid. Boston Scott showed great improvement. Wide receiver-wise, they still have Aguilar. They still have 2 of the better tight ends in the NFL in both Ertz and Dallas Goedert. Yep. So I think that Wentz stays healthy pretty much the whole season, and I got the Eagles going 10-6. That is good enough for the playoffs on my thing, but it's dependent on their matchups with the Cowboys as to who officially wins the NFC East.
For me, I have the Eagles doing a little bit worse. I have them going 7-9. A big trap game, I think, is going to be one of the Washington games, just because even though Jason Peters is back, he's close to 40, and their offensive line situation is a little bit shaky. And then to go against Washington's defensive line, which is very respectable, I think that could easily get them an upset over Philadelphia. And then I do think they can at least split the series with the Dallas Cowboys. It just seems like they seem to have their number when it comes to these divisional games against the Cowboys in recent years. So I think they can get at least one. But I don't know. I just don't plan on Carson Wentz being healthy a full season. He hasn't showed it yet. And, there's some questions with the offense and the defense, and I can't put them any higher in good faith.
Yeah, I can understand it, but I'm going with Brady here. I have him going 10-6. I think I like him. When Brandon Brooks went out, I went through my schedule, and I think I had him going 7-9. I think maybe at one point I had him going 6-10. But then when they signed Peterson back, Peters back. I bumped them back up to 10-6. I looked at some of their other things, some of the other players they got. I had to remember that they got Darius Slay, honestly, because I kind of forgot. And so they went back up to 10-6. But this is them like the teams they lose to are teams that are respectable. The only surprise one is really I have them losing to the Browns, and that's really a sleeper game because they have like 3 really easy games before that, and I think they get caught up in some kind of situations where they think it's an Eagles situation. They play down and they play up to their opponents. But I have them beating the Rams. I have them beating the Steelers. I have them going 1-1 with Dallas because I think those teams are really close, and I think it's up to between those two who wins the NFC East. But I also think that they're not good enough to beat the Niners or the Seahawks or Green Bay yet. I still think that they have too many issues, especially on that. Like the offensive line is becoming patchwork almost. It's still a really good offensive line, but it's patchwork. And like Brady said, the safety play still isn't where it needs to be. So I have some of those teams getting some wins. The only one that's kind of maybe a surprise is the Browns getting a win in there.
Yeah,
but they make the playoffs. They do make the playoffs.
I have them starting strong, 3-0. I think that first part of the schedule is fairly easy. Washington's strength is that defensive line, but Washington's strength is that defensive line, but there's so many questions at the corner position. There's so many questions on their skill positions that I think they sweep Washington. I have them sweeping the Giants. I could feasibly see them sweeping Dallas, and the reason is that their first matchup against Dallas, they go from a Thursday night game against the Giants that's at home to then a Sunday night game at home to the Cowboys. And that extra rest is crucial when you're playing in division. But I have them starting 3-0, and then I have them losing 3 straight, 2 San Fran, 2 Pitt, and then home against Baltimore. This killer for the Eagles has always been that they play to the level of their competition. So you can never tell if they're truly a good team or truly a bad team, because when they'll play a team, like I could see them being very competitive against San Francisco, Pittsburgh, and Baltimore, but I could also see them being very lackluster against the Giants. And I can see them being very lackluster against Arizona later in the season. I have them beating Cleveland, but I have them losing to Seattle and Green Bay and New Orleans. So I have them being a little streaky. That's where my losses come from. But I think 10-6 is about fair, and I think that they could easily make the playoffs, especially with that extra seed in the NFL this year.
Totally forgot. I have them beating the Saints. I forgot to say. I just totally had them because But like you said, it's because they can play up to their competition. They can play down to their competition. I think they're definitely one of the best teams in the NFC though. And I think that shows. But it's health problems for this offense and for this defense. It's patchwork sometimes, where it's really good in some positions, like like cornerback, really good. Darius Slay, awesome. Awesome cornerback, but their safety they don't really have somebody back there right now. They lost a huge part of that safety. Their defensive line, awesome, but their linebacker play isn't always best. So it's like, what do you do then? So yeah, we'll have to see.
And I think another huge thing that I don't think we've really talked about since the New Orleans episode is that as of right now, there aren't any fans in the stands in Philadelphia. They announced that they will not have any fans in the stands. So, and even an update like a team like Green Bay said their first 2 home games, they're not going to have any fans in the stands, and then they'll reevaluate after. Especially a place like Philadelphia, which has always been one of the most difficult places to play, not having those terrible, miserable, mean Philadelphia Eagles fans.
Poo-poo Santa, yeah, can really, I think can really change this team, because you know that when they go down to Dallas, Texas is going to be filled to the limit with as many fans are going to be there, and other stuff like that. So that's what's going to be most interesting. So yeah, me and Skyler have them going 10-6, both in the playoffs. For me, it's just going to be dependent on how they do against the Cowboys.
What seed do you have them then? Right now.
Because I have them beating the Cowboys in my Cowboys schedule, I had them sweeping it. I have them coming in at the 4 seed.
Okay.
But it's all going to be dependent on that Cowboys schedule, because I have both them and the Cowboys at 10-6. But it's just how they play each other.
Yeah, because for me, they barely squeak in. They're the 7th seed for me.
Jesus, you guys don't know how to make a schedule.
Well, I know. Okay, but like the difference between them and the top team isn't much, and that's just because like I look at the NFC. The only division, in my opinion, that doesn't have 2 really good teams, and even then, they still have a good team, is is the North. The NFC North, where it's like you could have Chicago making the playoffs, but that depends again on how their offense plays. Where it's like every other division, they have two teams where like their offense is going to be able to do something, whether it's passing or running. Their defense is going to be able to do something, whether that's pass rushing or stopping the run. Like it's pretty consistent along the top 7 teams in the NFC.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, they play a lot of test games. I mean, they've got Seattle, Green Bay, and New Orleans all in consecutive weeks.
Yeah.
San Francisco early in the season, Pittsburgh early in the season, Baltimore early in the season. Their season is going to be made on that game against Baltimore. That's really where we're going to see this level of team. And then from there, picking it up. Now, luckily, I mean, they play the Giants 2 out of 3 games, but there's a bye week in the middle, and they play the Cowboys pretty far apart as well as the Redskins. So let's move on to our next segments here. Now we have our hero of the episode, and then we have our What a Putz segment. My hero goes to Devin Booker / the Phoenix Suns. They are 4-0 in the bubble. They are proving that Phoenix basketball does exist. It's not the crapshoot that it used to be. That the years of mourning the loss of Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire and other stuff like that are over. That Devin Booker can truly build this team to be something great. They are currently a game and a half back from Portland for the 9 seed and only 2 games back from Memphis for the 8 seed. They've got games against the Heat, Thunder, Sixers, and Mavs. If they can keep the streak going, this team reasonably has a chance at maybe forcing that bubble type thing, because I think the Grizzlies are going to fall off, and I think that we might see an 8 versus 9 play-in where it's Trailblazers versus Suns. And if you look at the Suns,
so much fun to watch.
Oh yeah, if you look at the Suns wins, the Wizards, which was expected, but then they beat the Mavs by 2, they beat the Clippers by 2, and they beat the Pacers by 15. Like, they manhandled the Pacers.
Those are 3 teams that they honestly should have lost to.
They should have started the season out 1-3 because the Mavs are great, the Clippers are a good team, and the Pacers are a good team now that Oladipo's back. Next big matchup is against the Heat. That's what's going to be interesting. Are we going to get Jimmy Butler back? How are they going to play? And then the Thunder, who we've always been high on. But mine goes to the Suns, because I was a team that thought they would get cakewalked once the bubble reopened. I took the Pelicans more seriously, or the Grizzlies more seriously, and I was wrong for that. So my hero goes to Devin Booker and the Suns for just balling out.
Yeah, and just based off something you said before I do my hero, I want to take back my pick of the Grizzlies possibly getting the 8th seed. I did not know that they lost Jaren Jackson Jr. for the season. So,
yeah.
Yes, I think that came out after we had been done recording.
Yeah, so sorry about that. I did not know that. So obviously they're going to be shit. So that's obviously not one of my picks anymore. So I have an honorable mention before I get to my hero. My honorable mention is Chandler Jones, just because it got reported that he's next door neighbors with his defensive coordinator, Vance Joseph. And then Chandler Jones tweeted a reply to it saying, like, yeah, his nosy ass always peeking out the windows. So I think that's hilarious. And then my hero, I'm going to keep it the same vein as you, Brady. It's got to be Melo, man. I mean, the dude came in clutch for them in that game. He hit the game-sealing 3, and then he put up a double-double in that win, 15 points and 11 rebounds. So, I got to give my props to Melo, a guy who's been written off most of the season. I'm glad he's producing, and I think the league is better when, Carmelo Anthony is balling out.
Yeah, in the same vein of you guys, I'm also going to pick a player or players that people kind of write off. I'm doing Chris Paul in that front and backcourt. The other guards for
backcourt.
Backcourt for OKC. I mean, him and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. These were 2 players that were traded who thought that they were in the future for the Rockets and the Clippers respectively, and they were mad that they got traded. They were surprised that they got traded. And they came into OKC with nobody having any expectations for this team. Nobody really thinking they were going to be able to do. Not Dennis Schroeder, that's who it was. Who was with Atlanta and doing starting minutes before he came to OKC. Those 3 players have taken this team from a lot of people thought were going to be a lottery pick, missing the playoffs, not going to be doing well. Where's Chris Paul going to be traded to for assets? Who are they getting for picks? And these 3 players have shown that they're really good and that this OKC team is really good. and that Steven Adams is the Thunder from down under. He's amazing. We love Steven Adams. With that fucking tattoo and the ponytail, rocking it, and the fucking amazing beard.
Looking like Jason Momoa.
Looking like Jason Momoa out there, just trolling people, heading the half court with one hand. But yeah, no, he's Chris Paul specifically, but OKC backcourt are my hero because after beating the Lakers, and as a Celtics fan, I always love seeing the Lakers take a hit. So yeah, I have to give it to them.
I wonder if Steven Adams is Dothraki.
He's a New Zealander.
No, he's from New Zealand.
He's New Zealand, which is the Dothraki. He's the Dothraki of the sea.
You guys are dumb. The Dothraki don't take ships.
The horses don't like the
You're
water.
for the Dragon Mother.
The Dragon Queen, yeah.
Dragon Queen.
So then we have our what a putts. This goes to a team, an organization, a moment that did something rather idiotic. Mine goes to the NFL Top 100 for simply leaving Carson Wentz off the list. Carson Wentz last year, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, played in 16 games, 63% completion rating. He has the 8th highest passer rating of any quarterback since coming into the league. He played with a bunch of no-names, and yet you're going to put guys like Jimmy G on that list ahead of him. You're going to put Ryan Tannehill on that list ahead of him. Had he, unfortunately, not gotten concussed against the Seahawks, they would have won that game. And they would have given whoever they would have played in the divisional round, which most likely would have been San Francisco, I believe. No, they would have gone back to Green Bay because the Vikings had beat the Saints. A serious run for their money. I don't know how you leave Carson Wentz off that list, and we talk about the list of other quarterbacks who are on there. Carson Wentz is a way better quarterback than Jimmy G, than Ryan Tannehill, than a lot of other guys. He absolutely deserves to be on that list, as well as I'm going to throw a shout out to Derek Carr for not being on that list too, because Derek Carr,
that guy's been putting up amazing numbers the last 2 years. No, he's been pure
21
numbers.
touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 70% completion rating, adjusted 77% completion rating.
40,
and he's done it.
4,000 yards.
4,000 yards. He's done it with no wide receivers as well.
No one's down there.
And yet you're going to put Ryan Tannehill and Jimmy G and other names like that. It's ridiculous. So that's my putts, goes to the NFL Top 100 list.
Well, yeah, I think they only put him on there because they led their teams to championship, in their respective conferences. Carson Wentz obviously, does what he does best is get hurt before or during the playoffs, and then that kind of stuff, and then. I think Derek Carr is just being held back just because of the Raiders are bad.
Yeah, well, no, you're exactly right. But I hate the whole I understand the Wentz narrative, but I hate the Wentz narrative because it's not like he's purposely going to get hurt, right? Like Jadeveon Clowney just landed on top of him and his head got hit into the ground. It's concussion protocol. It happens. He got blindsided when he ended up cracking his back. It happens. He's not out there purposely trying to get hurt, and I hate the narrative around him because when he's healthy, oh my God, is he one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL? And case in point, go watch the end of the season against teams like the Redskins, against teams like the Cowboys. Go watch the game, the Giants. Go watch the game against Green Bay earlier in the season. He played baller. So I get the narrative. I don't understand why we use that against him when we're talking about top 100 appreciation posts. Because even when Aaron Rodgers broke his collarbone, Aaron Rodgers was still on the top 100.
True, but it's the same reason why Ja Morant's going to win the Rookie of the Year over Zion Williamson. I mean, you got to be healthy, and Carson Wentz just can't be healthy and consistent,
So why do we put Ryan Tannehill on the list, who didn't join until week 6 as the starter, but we're not going to put Carson Wentz on the list, who played 16 games last year?
Because he spark-plugged his team to an AFC championship and beat the Patriots and the Ravens in doing so. So that's why he gets the credit.
Let's not pretend like he was the spark plug there. Let's talk about Derrick Henry.
You think they could have? You think they would have made the AFC Championship with Marcus Mariota as quarterback?
I feel like if they had a better offensive line, they would have.
Yeah,
fine now.
Yeah, no, Marcus Mariota got a ton of shit for being a bad quarterback when he was getting sacked all the time. I got to look it up because it was ridiculous. He got sacked what was it? It was 30 times in 6 weeks.
But the offensive line is fine.
No, it's not. They were ranked dead last.
The guards are a little bit shaky, but the center and 2 tackles are great.
What 2 tackles? Who do they have to replace Conklin?
He's talking about last year.
Oh, we're talking about last year. No, yeah. I mean when I'm talking about who did I want the whole season, man, I take Carson Wentz over Ryan Tannehill. I understand the spark plug thing. It's a biased list. They're going to put people on that who led their team to some form of success. That's why Kirk Cousins was as high on the list as he was, because they won that one playoff game. But if you look at like Ryan Tannehill last year, and he's just the one that pisses me off so bad, because like I understand it, but 2,700 yards, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, like he did not play fantastic. He was by definition a game manager, while Carson Wentz led that team to that playoff berth. Granted, in part because the Cowboys ended up sucking down the backstretch.
Yeah, but he can't close.
He can't close just because he gets hurt, and that's not his fault.
I know. I'm not saying it's his fault, but it happens every year. He can't close. That's why his backup had to get him a Super Bowl ring for him.
And that narrative I hate too, because Carson Wentz would have won him a Super Bowl. Had he been playing, Carson Wentz they easily would have won that Super Bowl.
No. But just to put it out there, Marcus Mariota played 7 games, started 6, and he was sacked 25 times.
As he's averaging 4 sacks a game in his starts.
When
you completely change the playbook to the most simplified version because you don't have full faith in Ryan Tannehill until much later, and even then, Tannehill threw 12 passes in the divisional round against the Ravens. He didn't throw really that many against the Patriots. So when push came to shove against those top defenses, Tannehill was a no-show. Granted, because they didn't need him to be a big show because Derrick Henry was running all over.
Well, they're just taking the San Fran approach. I mean, Jimmy G took that approach all the way to almost a Super Bowl win.
You're right, and that's why in that list I say Ryan Tannehill and Jimmy G, because they both don't deserve to be on that ahead of Carson Wentz. But I digress. So, Mitch, who's your putts?
All right, yeah, my turn. Okay, so like with my hero list, I also have an honorable mention for this one. This one is for COVID-19 because Zadarius Smith came out and said there will be no more Smith Brothers interviews, which makes me very sad.
All right.
And it makes me want to play the ending of the original Planet of the Apes when he finds the Statue of Liberty. So that's very putsy and makes me very sad. But my number one putts has to go to Maryland head coach Michael Locksley, and here's why. So he is forming a national coalition to identify and groom coaches of color, male and female. And out of those board of directors, it's Ozzie Newsome, Nick Saban, and Mike Tomlin. My issue with it is if you're trying to coach, groom coaches of color for male and female, not having a female on that board of directors kind of pisses me off, because how are you going to groom like female coaches of color or, white if you don't have a female who's, been through the system and knows what it's like to be a female coach in the NFL? How could you have, that doesn't make sense to me. So that's why
is it specifically just NFL and football in general, or is it like all sports kids having?
I mean, I'm guessing it's NFL and college because, the board of directors is Ozzie Newsome, Nick Saban, and Mike Tomlin. So it's not like any other sports on there. So I guess it's just football in general. But how can you do that? How can you groom female coaches if you don't have a female at all on your board of directors? So that's what I don't get, and I don't get how Nick Saban is going to be able to identify and coach and groom coaches of color. So I have my problem is with Michael Locksley's choice of board of directors.
Well, I get why Nick Saban would be on there because Saban was the huge reason why Locksley got the job in Maryland. But I can agree with it. I can understand that. Skyler, your putts?
My putts is a CBS reporter by the name of Cody Benjamin. He wrote an article saying that Daniel Jones has just as much of a chance of making a huge leap and being in the MVP consideration in his second year as Kyler Murray.
What?
Yeah. No, has just as much of a chance of making a huge leap in his second year and being a long shot for the MVP as Kyler Murray.
He must not watch any Giants football.
Wait. Does he elaborate, or is that just the point?
No. He elaborates. He goes into why and talks about.
Can you give us some pointers from it, please? I just want to understand his reasoning.
I need to find it. But it's he does in fact note that Kyler Murray has all of these weapons around him. Let's see. It's the Daniel. I have to find it because it's talking about Daniel Jones.
Okay, well, while Skylar finds that, let's get to our listener email. We received a listener email from a listener, Scott. And for that, Scott, we say thank you. The question, I'm going to focus it towards Mitch. I've got a little bit of an input on it. Goes, don't you think Mason Crosby will opt out, and where is our next kicker coming from? Now, unfortunately, we got this email on Wednesday. The cutoff for the NFL opt-out was earlier today. Mason Crosby did not opt out, but he has been on the COVID-19 reserve list for the Packers. I do think it is interesting to talk about maybe where that next kicker will come from, because I've got a guy that I actually really like, and I've watched him for a while down there in Iowa. And now I got to get his name pulled up because I did not have it pulled up. Keith Duncan. As a junior last year, 29 of 34 for kicks, playing in the Big Ten. Solid. I like him a lot. I liked his games against USC. I thought he was productive. I was wondering if Crosby was going to opt out because he was on the Packers COVID list, but again, it doesn't look like he did, and that was just due to timing. But Mitch, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, first off, when you said that Duncan name, I automatically thought of the guy in the Heat, Duncan Robinson. So I was like really confused. But anyways, like you said, obviously the opt-out period is gone, so he can't really do that. But for some strange reason, they decide to push the deadline again for whatever reason, and he does choose to opt out. There's definitely a bunch of guys that, veteran kickers that you could go with. I think the best one out of the bunch is probably, longtime Patriots kicker, Stephen Gostkowski. I think he's the best name available on the market. Adam Vinatieri is still on the market, but he's not the same Adam Vinatieri. But yeah, there's a lot of proven guys on, the market. So I definitely think you could find them, or you could go with Brady's guy and get a young guy in there because, sooner or later we're going to need to replace Mason Crosby just because he's getting up there in age. So yeah, I think that's the two routes you would have to go if for some reason Mason Crosby is able to opt out.
Yeah, and it would actually be really sad if Crosby leaves because him and Rodgers are the only current players from that Super Bowl team. And, Rodgers obviously has his timetable now with the Jordan Love pickup. I love Mason Crosby, his one bad season that he had, especially that game against Detroit, where he missed 4 field goals. I was reading something that was really interesting about how the pure irony of if the Packers were to then go pick up Cody Parkey and have Cody Parkey hit a game winner against the Bears, I think that would be just like
I'm down for that.
Beautiful justice.
I'm a Packers fan. Like, it's not his fault. It was a blocked kick. Let's get that straight.
It was
tipped. It was a tipped kick. It's not like he was bad. It just got tipped, and nobody talks about that.
Yeah, and as we saw from last season, kicker wasn't the only problem with the Bears. Did you find that article, Scott?
I did. Okay, so he goes into it, and he's basically saying that the main reason he's talking about this is because he believes Jones is an underrated quarterback, which I can, in fact, argue there is a point to that. But here he goes. So he's talking about this. He brings up the point that nobody would draft Jones over Kyler Murray in a fantasy draft ever.
No, never.
Or that if you would advocate for Jones over Murray in real life, but that the statistics are similar. He says, let's review Jones' rookie year. He goes, in 13 games, 12 of which he started, the 23-year-old quarterback passed for 3,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions, and an 87.7 passer rating, completing nearly 62% of his throws. So, I mean, he's like, Jones was 4 touchdowns short of Baker Mayfield's rookie record. And so he goes, if you take that and you go over 16 games with, per game, he goes, he's throwing almost 4,000 yards, 29 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, and completing 61% of his passes. And he goes, that's better than what Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, Carson Wentz, and Lamar Jackson did in their rookie years, over 16 games. And then he's like, okay, well, understandable. All of those players took big leaps in their second year. So Daniel Jones could do the same. And he goes, but the fumbles, right? He goes, Carson Wentz and Lamar Jackson also led the league in quarterback fumbles during their rookie years, so he could solve that issue because he has a horrible offensive line. And then he says, let's consider the circumstances. He goes, the reason why the offense wasn't clicking in the Giants was because Pat Shermer was a bad offensive play caller, and that Saquon Barkley, Sterling Shepard, and even Graham were basically limping throughout the season because offensive direction under Pat Shermer wasn't good. And he's saying that because of the upside of all these players and having Jason Garrett as the play caller, because the thing that made Jason Garrett a bad coach wasn't his play calling, but the managerial duties he had as the Cowboys head coach is what really made him a bad head coach. And saying that New York's supporting cast is better than Gardner Minshew's, which Gardner Minshew is a better quarterback than Daniel Jones, in my opinion. And he showed up with a worse supporting cast in Jacksonville last year. And then at the very end, he goes, "Are Jones Giants good enough as a whole to propel him into the actual MVP race? That's a long shot. And truth be told, if Murray's Cardinals are challenging for an NFC West title, where New York is spending the playoffs at home for the 8th time in the last 9 years, well, no one's going to have any trouble declaring Arizona QBs the true breakout of 2020. Just know that if 2019 was any indication, Jones very much belongs on any radar scanning for the NFL's next hot young talent intercept."
Do you want to go first, Brady, or do you want me to?
You can go first. I'm trying to not.
Okay, fair enough.
face.
That was totally asinine. I mean, so let's be honest. So he's saying that the fumbles is gonna like magically go away because the offensive line is gonna get better. Is that what you're saying?
He's saying that the other two quarterbacks that led in quarterback fumbles their rookie years also got better with it, Carson Wentz and Lamar Jackson, not to mention that those two are like once-in-a-generational talents. And
but they have way better offensive lines. I mean,
and they can run. They can move.
Exactly. Yeah, they're mobile. But the Giants' offensive line is trash, and Nate Solder opted out, and that's their left tackle, even though he's trash. But still, your left tackle, that offensive line is shit. He has nobody to throw to in the wide receiver core, let's be honest. I think Sterling Shepard's overrated. He's been trash since Odell Beckham's gone. Evan Ingram hasn't lived up to the hype. It's Saquon Barkley as your offense. I mean, how does he think that kind of offense and that shitty defense is going to get them to the playoffs for Daniel Jones to even whiff at the MVP conversation? Because there's no way in fucking hell that if Daniel Jones just puts up gaudy numbers, but his team goes like 4-12, that he's going to win the MVP. That's stupid.
He's a long shot. He's not saying he's going to. He said it's a long shot, but
there's no way he would even consider. They wouldn't talk about
just
him.
Just as good of a chance of being the 2020 young quarterback breakout player as Kyler Murray. He also has this to say. You might even be able to argue that left tackle Nate Solder opting out of the 2020 season is more good news for Jones, depending on the progress of first-round pick Andrew Thomas.
No, because the whole point was they drafted Thomas to be in conjunction with Solder.
Yeah, it's right tackle.
So now they're down a tackle, and they're going to put a rookie at the other tackle.
So do you understand now why he's my putz?
And a COVID-19 preseason.
Do you understand now why he's my putz? Because this guy makes no sense.
Yeah, I totally get it. I just
calling Jason Garrett a good play caller, and the reason that he was.
I totally forgot that point.
That's
totally bullshit.
That he was like he's a pass-heavy play caller and does good things with the pass, and I'm like, okay, maybe, but the reason he was able to do that is because Dallas has one of the best offensive lines in the NFL continuously over multiple years. Like, that was the reason why Romo was able to put up the numbers he did. That's why which Murray was able to have the amazing – DeMarco Murray was able to have the MVP-level season he did and then did nothing anywhere else he went.
But even so, like, the Giants don't have, like, the weapons for Daniel Jones to do that kind of shit. And
no, they don't.
We saw what happened with Ezekiel Elliott under Jason Garrett. He was constantly being, like, limited minutes and chained to it and shit. And with Saquon Barkley being your only offense – he's going to do that shit, and you're probably going to be even worse, and you're probably going to be crying for, like, Ben McAdoo to come back. And then for Pat Shermer, yeah, he's a shitty head coach, but I think he's, like, I call it the Ken Wisenhunt type. It's where they're great offensive coordinators, but as soon as they're a head coach, they're just bad. So, Pat Shermer can be an offensive coordinator and be great, but as a head coach, obviously he's bad. So, I don't know.
I guess what it comes down to is, like, if we look at when they played premier talents, so when we looked at, like, how Kyler Murray played in the 2 games against San Francisco and against Seattle. He played really
Amazing.
well.
Yeah.
And that's even excluding the fact that they've gotten better, you know?
Yeah.
And then when you look at how Daniel Jones played against Green Bay with multiple interceptions, against Philadelphia, you look at how he played against Dallas, he was absolute horseshit.
Yeah.
So it's like, great. Yeah, he won a week 3 matchup in Tampa Bay with a Tampa team that was trash.
Drew
Hey,
Lock has a
great.
better chance. Drew Lock has a
Yeah.
better chance of
Hey,
being
yeah,
an MVP.
for sure.
level.
Hey, great. They played okay against the Redskins. But when you're talking about, like, we agreed when we went over the Giants schedule, it was brutal. Like, it's hard to look
No,
at.
it's horrible. Yeah.
And I had them, I think, barely going 2-14, and you guys had them way worse than that.
I had a 3-13.
Something like that. Being an MVP means that you're either great statistically or you're great against premier talents, and he's not going to be responsible for either of those. He had 18 lost fumbles. 18. The dude was averaging more than 1 lost fumble a game. And if you want an example as to how unaware he is as a quarterback, go watch the game against the Jets where Adams comes up and literally just pulls the ball out of his hands. Go watch his first game against the Cowboys where he comes in and on a drive he goes to slide and the ball just slips right out of his hands. Like, yeah, fumbling is a problem. Most quarterbacks will have some form of a fumbling issue in their first year. They're not used to the size of the ball. It's different than in college. People hit harder the whole 9 yards. No, that article is absolutely fucking ridiculous. So fuck you, Corey Benjamin.
Yeah, just put this. Stidham has a better chance of being the young talent that is hot and rising in 2020 than Daniel Jones does, and that's because he has a better offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say Justin Herbert has a better chance, and I hate Justin Herbert. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, no.
And this is not a knock on Daniel Jones' talent because I do believe he's an underrated quarterback. It's the idea of the Giants don't have the weapons that can make him an MVP talent because they don't. They don't have wide receivers. They don't have offensive line. If you want to know more, go listen to our Giants episode.
Well, yeah, and like the one good play he had against the Patriots was a ball that should have been intercepted that got tipped into the hands of Golden Tate for a touchdown. So
Exactly.
It's a carbon copy Eli Manning.
Yeah, exactly. So that's our What Up Putts. We appreciate the listener email from Mike. Unfortunately, just due to the when we record and stuff, by the time we recorded it, we'd already gotten our answer on Mason Crosby, but we do appreciate that listener email. And guys, email us, fourthstringsp@gmail.com. Follow us on everything, Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, YouTube, Reddit, the whole 9 yards, Fourth String Sports Podcast. The next couple episodes we got Pittsburgh coming up next, and then we got Seattle and San Francisco. So we're going to close out the AFC North, and we're going to close out the NFC West as we wrap up our last couple of episodes here. By the time we get to, I think, the Seattle episode, we should be towards the end of the bubble, if not the very end. By the time we get to the San Francisco episode, we'll be pretty much into the NBA playoffs if there's a playoff tournament. And
football will be kicking back up by that time.
Yep, football will be coming up. We'll have our guaranteed first-round pick who tears his ACL in training camp because it happens every single year.
Who's your bets? Who's your bets?
Justin Jefferson, just because he's a wide receiver. That or like, honestly, that or like maybe Jalen Reagor or just it's usually
Trent Wirfs.
I'm gonna go Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Edwards-Helaire.
That'd be bad.
Yeah, Tristan Wirfs is on there.
Offensive linemen or skill positions. That's where it always happens.
Yeah, typically speaking, that's where it'll go on. I could also see like just because it's Jacksonville and he's a pass rusher, like Clavon Chaseon could do it because that happened a couple of years in a row.
Isaiah Simmons.
Yeah, there's a bunch of that'd be really sad though because I want to see him play so bad.
Okay. Anyways.
But yeah, so we got Pittsburgh, Seattle, San Francisco. We got football coming up. We'll have a clearer picture as to baseball. There's been a couple of games. We're just going to do episodes or updates every couple of episodes on that. We appreciate everybody listening. Gentlemen, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to put out the fans what I told you during one of our breaks. Obviously, it came out that KG wants to buy the T-Wolves, but it came out tonight that he wants to move them to Seattle to bring back the Supersonics.
Hell yeah, man. Seattle needs a basketball team, man. I miss the Supersonics.
Yeah, I want them to get one before Las Vegas does because Las Vegas is building up on sports teams. I don't like
For sure.
Well, yeah, they should just put one in Seattle and one in Las Vegas, and then they should rework it because why Memphis plays in the West makes no sense to me. Why New Orleans plays in the West makes no sense to me.
Put the Kings in Las Vegas.
Yeah, you could easily do that. But no, we appreciate everybody for listening to go ahead, Skyler.
The last thing, I brought up a couple weeks ago about doing a fantasy league. I don't know if we've got any traction or anybody for football, but we're getting closer towards that. Please let us know by like the last episode before the month ends because that's when we're supposed to be getting pro football.
Yeah.
So
knock on wood.
Knock on wood. But
So
yeah,
if you guys know anybody who'd be interested in that, we'll go as large as we can on a league. But no, we appreciate everybody for tuning in to this episode of the Fourth String Sports Podcast. Everybody have a fantastic night. We'll get this and the previous episode posted on everything. We got the last couple episodes posted. We're up to date. We're current right now. We appreciate everybody listening. Everybody have a fantastic night.